India has inked a 100 billion free trade deal with four non-EU nations. India is set to lift most tariffs on several sectors with Switzerland, Iceland, Norway, and Liechtenstein. India and the European Free Trade Association deal is to help boost trade and investments. It will help boost trade and investments across the board, many feel. To decode this further, we are joined by Mr. Jaijit Bhattacharya. He is the director at Center for Digital Economy Policy Research and someone who tracks economies and policies very, very closely. Thank you for your time and thank you for doing this for us and our viewers. To begin with, why is this deal so significant?
India has been reluctant to get into free trade agreements for quite some time. We had signed free trade agreements with Korea, with Japan, with ASEAN, and every time we signed an agreement, we ended up losing in that. We would end up importing far more, and our exports would reduce. This is an agreement that has taken quite some time to come in. Over 15 years it took for this agreement to fructify, but it's been crafted in a manner that it's a win-win for both the EFTA countries as well as India. So we hope we will not end up losing when we sign this agreement, which we have already signed, and we will equally gain as much as the EFTA countries will do. So it's a balanced agreement rather than a one-side agreement, which is what we have been signing earlier. And therefore, this is really a landmark, and also an important component of this agreement is that it promises $1 billion of investment coming in the next 15 years. And that's very, very significant. We have not had any such free trade agreements earlier, which also had a component of compulsory or mandatory investments coming in. Those investments are supposed to create 1 million jobs in this country, which is humongous. And this is direct jobs. It's not about the indirect jobs that the rickshaw puller will get or the transportation person will get. This is direct paying jobs that we created. And therefore, it's very, very landmark. It will also become a template for future such agreements. Also, it takes care of services because, as you know, India is largely a services-driven economy. We are very good in services, including IT, in fact, this agreement also talks about sports services. And so that's very, very interesting components that have been added. So it allows for free trade in services, which is going to help all of us who are into services.
Right. Take us through the near term impact to the viewer or the consumer sitting at home. This landmark deal, really, what will it change for their life?
I think cheaper chocolates and cheaper alcohol, those are things that will happen now. Interestingly, the trade between EFTA and India is about roughly $19 billion, out of which we export only $2 billion. There's $17 billion that we are importing. But however, within the $17 billion, about 80% is gold, right? And gold is carved out in this agreement. So if people are thinking they might get cheaper gold, that will not happen. But everything else that we import from Europe, such as chocolates from Switzerland or fine wine and so on, those will become cheaper. Cars might get cheaper if they are routed through the EFTA countries. Although none of the four countries, which is Liechtenstein, Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, they're not really car producing countries, but they can have subsidiaries of other European car makers such as Mercedes or Peugeot and so on, and then they can start manufacturing cars in India and might be able to get some benefits, which means that there'll be cheaper cars that will also coming in, and especially the more expensive German cars. If they leverage this agreement, they'll be able to sell cheaper in India.
Right. Very interesting for the viewer and the consumer sitting at home to be able to relate to, from chocolates to fine wine to the cars, like you mentioned. But any timeline we have for the impact of this deal, really? When will they see these cheaper rates?
It takes time. The draft of the agreement was just released yesterday. People are still pouring through it. Companies needs to get aligned. So when free trade agreements are being negotiated, they are strictly under wraps. So the corporates don't have visibility to what's really going on. So nobody is really prepared for this agreement. So it'll take at least 6 months to a year before we really start seeing some of the benefits coming in. But things like chocolates will be easier to take care of because they're easier to transport. So those who've got a sweet tooth will really find this to be a good deal. But I also am hoping that the reverse will happen, that we'll be able to sell our chocolates into Europe because we are quite cost competitive. We also have very good chocolates. So I'm hoping that it will not be just us having the European chocolates. I hope the Europeans also get a taste of Indian chocolate.
That's right. And Atmanirbharta and Make in India, they're coming in as well. Very interesting times ahead for sure. But many saying that this deal will, help the engineering, pharma, food processing sectors in particular. So which sectors do you feel will benefit the most?
All of these pharma. Well, in fact, Switzerland is the home for many of the large big pharma companies. So hopefully they'll start setting up base in India and sell back in Europe. And India has got great capabilities in pharma. So we hope that kind of investment will come in. Medical devices, most of our equipment that we use in hospitals, be it MRI, be it all the very very high end expensive equipments, this agreement is going to bring down that cost. So cost of healthcare itself will come down because equipment cost will come down, and even processed foods. Even though there is sensitivity around food, around agricultural producers, and therefore they have been kept aside from both sides. But processed food is something that is still part of this agreement, and therefore you will see cheaper processed foods coming in on both sides. So medical devices, processed food, pharma, these are the places that we'll see benefits coming in. Services, nursing, chartered accountants, architects. In fact, there is a clause which says that there will be mutual recognition in professional services, which means that if you do nursing in India and you get a degree, then that degree or that diploma will be recognized in the EFTA countries, and therefore you can actually go there and start practicing nursing. Unlike in the previous years where you have to get a separate certification, once you reach those countries, you don't need to do that. Same with chartered accountants. If you get the chartered accountancy degree in India, that degree will be recognized in European Union. So you can actually move to, sorry, not the European Union, but the EFTA countries. So you can actually move to the EFTA countries and practice there, or you can actually run the practice setting out of India. Same with architects. So this is huge amount of opening up that will happen, and then the EFTA countries will become a stepping stone to reach out to the rest of Europe. So it's not just access to EFTA, but it's access to rest of Europe by having back-end offices for service providers, and it's going to bring down the cost for Europeans. It's going to create many job opportunities in India, and it's going to make things cheaper on both sides.
All right. So a cost competitive opportunity there, as well as, like you said, a big boost for trade, for investments, and for jobs. So, really, a landmark deal with a significant impact in the long run. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your insights on the subject.
My pleasure.